God requires us to trust and obey him and do exactly as he tells us to do. So when the people of Israel were in the wilderness for 40 years and complained that there was no water, God told Moses to take his stick, go to the rock, and speak to the rock, and the rock would bring forth water that would be enough for all of the Israelites. But because Moses was angry, he did take his stick, he went to the rock, but instead of speaking to the rock, he struck the rock 2 times. Disobedience has its price. He was not allowed to see the promised land because of his disobedience. Disobedience has its price. And waiting on God can be a very hard thing to do. When we see others advancing towards their dreams, and yet God has called us to wait. Waiting on God can be a very difficult thing. And when I look back on my life, waiting for me has been a huge challenge. I remember when I was 5 and all excited about going to first grade and all dressed up, and I couldn't wait to go to the big school, and my mother took me there, and only to find out that because my birthday was in January, I had to wait. I had to wait out a whole school year. So waiting to me always shows up as a punishment. But over the years, I have learned that there are rewards in waiting. I've seen some real rewards in waiting. In our text today, we see that the people of God had gone into exile because of their sins. And the exile is an expression of God's judgment. There is judgment for disobedience. But in addition, the time in exile was a time for the people to reflect on not only what they had done, but what God had done for them. As Reverend Jeremiah Wright says, thinking leads to thanking. If we spend a little time thinking, we ought to be thanking God for all that he has done for us. So the first words that the prophet Isaiah says to the people who have been in exile is one of reassurance. God has not abandoned his people, and he has not inflicted a permanent punishment on them. They needed to be reminded, and we need to be reminded of the greatness of God. They needed to be reminded, and we need to be reminded that it was God who brought them through. It was God who brought them through yesterday. It is God who is keeping them today. And it is God who will see them through to tomorrow. Oh, he's a mighty God. He is all powerful, and no one compares to God. Beside him, there is no other. They had to learn to depend totally on God. God will send an answer in his appointed time. And he is not only an all-powerful God, he is also a God of grace and mercy. Thank God that he is a God of grace and mercy. Because without grace and mercy, where would we be? Where would we be? The other thing we need to be aware of is that God's timing is better than ours. He knows the plans he has for us, and in the fullness of his time, he will come. This year we decided to plant some tomato plants, and we went to the Eastern market that have been out there in the heat of the sun. They come forth with a red, juicy flavor. And I said, we are just like those tomatoes, you know? When we come through the heat of losing a loved one, the heat of losing a job, the heat of an illness that will not go away, the heat of some discrimination, the heat of some sexism. Oh, we come through. We are juicing with the fruit of the Spirit. Love, peace, grace, gentleness, faithfulness. Oh, we come through for God's glory. He can use us. Oh, but we got to take some heat. So we should not try to get ahead of God. We say that he may not come when you want him to, but he's always on time. He's an on-time God. And we find in the scripture that there's a time and a season for every activity under heaven. A time to be born and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to uproot. A time